Hello, everybody. Happy Tuesday, and welcome to the State Department. It is only Tuesday, regrettably, Matt. But anyway, we wanted to start off today. As everyone knows, many of you anticipate, next week the world's attention focuses on the UN General Assembly, which begins this weekend in New York City. So we thought it would be useful to have the Assistant Secretary for International Organizations Affairs, Sheba Crocker, come and talk a little bit about what our priorities are, what we expect the Secretary to do, with the caveat that we don't know what his bilat schedule will be yet, and we'll certainly inform you as that takes shape, and what the general priorities are for our week or two up at the UN General Assembly. So without further ado, and she'll be able to take one or two of your questions after she makes a brief statement. So without further ado, Sheba, sorry.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And as Mark said, and I know you are all aware, we are approaching high-level week of the UN General Assembly's 71st session, which is notable, as it always is, for many reasons, but this year especially because of the fact that it will be President Obama's last UN General Assembly, as well as the last for Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. In keeping with the President's determination for the past 8 years to use this unique diplomatic environment of UNGA to maximum positive effect, this year, as we have done in the past, will feature events and activities designed to advance key U.S. multilateral objectives. You may recall that last year's UN General Assembly featured activities that the U.S. participated in and led that resulted in significant new commitments to UN peacekeeping, that strengthened the range of allies and actions to counter ISIL and violent extremism, that launched ambitious new development goals, and that significantly advanced the climate change negotiations. This year, we are focusing on three top-line priorities as we head into the UN General Assembly: humanitarian response, peace and security, and countering terrorism and violent extremism. In addition, the United States will also move forward with UN member states on a number of other issues of continuing importance, including, again, climate change, sustainable development, human rights, nuclear disarmament, and UN reform. Of course, as Mark noted, Secretary Kerry's schedule is evolving by the minute, so for today I will speak briefly about the key events that are already confirmed and that reflect the Secretary's priorities for high-level week in New York. At present, we expect the Secretary to arrive in New York on Saturday, the 17th of September. On Sunday, the 18th, his first official event will be to represent the United States at a ministerial meeting on the Global Demining Initiative for Colombia, where participants will announce concrete pledges to humanitarian mine action and to help Colombia rid itself of landmines by 2021. Later that same afternoon, on September 18th, he will attend the Social Good Summit, where global leaders and grassroots activists will discuss the impact of technology and new media on social good initiatives around the world. On the morning of Monday, the 19th, the Secretary is currently slated to hold a series of bilateral meetings, and in the afternoon, he will deliver remarks on behalf of the United States at the General Assembly's high-level plenary on refugees and migrants. And this event precedes and complements the President's Leaders Summit on Refugees, which takes place the next day. On Tuesday morning, the 20th of September, President Obama will make his 8th and final speech to the General Assembly, and the Secretary will obviously be present for that and will also join the President that same day during the President's meetings with the General Assembly President and with Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. The Secretary will also join President Obama on the 20th of September at the annual lunch hosted by the Secretary General for heads of delegations. And that same afternoon, again September 20th, the Secretary will join the President for his Leaders Summit on Refugees, which will be co-hosted by the Secretary General and by the heads of state or delegations from Canada, Ethiopia, Germany, Jordan, Sweden, and Mexico. You're all fully aware, I know, of the scope and scale of the global refugee crisis, and the President's Summit responds not just to the headlines of yesterday and today, but to the broader and enduring strains on the humanitarian system. We expect that the summit will result in significant new, sustained commitments to UN humanitarian appeals, expanded refugee resettlement programs or alternative legal pathways for admission, and new opportunities for refugees and their host communities to benefit from improved refugee access to education and to legal employment. On the morning of Wednesday, September 21st, the Secretary will attend an event hosted by Secretary General Ban Ki-moon on the landmark climate change agreement that was adopted by nearly 200 countries in Paris last December. The event comes on the heels of the United States and China formally joining the Paris Agreement on September 3rd, and is focused on encouraging other countries to do the same with the goal of bringing the agreement into force by the end of this year. Later that morning, the Secretary will attend a Security Council session focused on Syria that has been called by New Zealand, which is the Security Council president for the month of September. In the afternoon, also on September 21st, the Secretary will attend the second 2016 U.S.-Africa Business Forum, which is co-hosted by Bloomberg Philanthropies and the U.S. Department of Commerce, and will focus on trade and investment opportunities on the African continent. On the morning of Thursday, September 22nd, that morning will begin with a ministerial event on Libya that the Secretary will co-host with his Italian counterpart. And the Secretary will then give remarks at the U.S. and Croatia co-hosted meeting of the Equal Futures Partnership. The event will celebrate the achievements of the partnership, which is an innovative multilateral initiative launched by President Obama at the General Assembly 5 years ago, which supports increased women's economic and political participation. Later that day, the Secretary will host the Coalition to Secure Ambition, an event focused on concrete action to advance the goals of the Montreal Protocol, which since 1987 has helped protect the ozone layer by phasing out ozone-depleting substances. That evening, so this is Thursday, September 22nd, the Secretary will host the annual transatlantic dinner for his EU counterparts, NATO allies, and other European partners. And that then brings us to Friday, September 23rd. In the morning, the Secretary will host a special foreign ministers session of the Major Economies Forum on Energy and Climate, where the dialogue will continue on concrete initiatives and joint ventures that increase access to clean energy while cutting greenhouse gas emissions. Throughout the week, as Mark noted, the Secretary will also attend a series of other meetings and bilaterals that are yet to be confirmed. So that gives you a glimpse of how this year's UNGA schedule is shaping up, and we will keep you updated as additional events are confirmed.
Thanks. Just a few questions. I think we have.
Well, I just have one. It's
Yeah,
very quick, and it's
please.
just logistical. There are no bilats that are confirmed?
Correct, at this time, none
Not
that
a
we can
single one?
confirm. Not a single one that we can confirm at this time.
I find that extremely hard to believe, but okay.
Go ahead. then.
Very quickly, you mentioned a lot of meetings for the Secretary. Is he holding any bilateral or trilateral meetings on the Middle East peace process?
There are none that we can confirm at this time, and as meetings get put on or things solidify, we will keep you updated.
Is it likely to happen?
We can't say at this point because we don't have any confirmation of how those meetings are shaping up, but if you look at the schedule of past UNGAs, I think you will see that there are generally meetings on this topic, and so we will just keep you updated as things get confirmed.
A question on a trilat. The India-Afghanistan U.S. trilat that the Secretary announced in Delhi. Any idea on when that could take place?
I don't have an idea at this point, so when we get some confirmation around that, we will let you know.
Okay, but it's still going ahead, or?
I don't have any information about it today, so we'll have to come back to you.
It's been announced as the 21st.
I think that's a target date, but again, we don't have anything to confirm at this point. Please, James.
Would it be safe to say that any interactions between the U.S. delegation and Iran's delegation would take place, quote unquote, on the sidelines of activity? In other words, the fact that the nuclear deal has been implemented or is being implemented, it does not put U.S.-Iran questions, such as I'm asking, into the category of the other questions about bilats, correct?
At this stage, we have nothing to say about any possible meetings that may be taking place between the Secretary and his counterparts. And I want to just make clear that I am talking today about things that have been confirmed for the Secretary's schedule. And so although there have been potential announcements about other meetings that are taking place, of which there will be many, the focus of today is on what the Secretary has currently confirmed in terms of his schedule.
If there were any interaction whatsoever, it wouldn't fall under the category of a bilat because there's no diplomatic relations, right? So it would be on the sidelines if anything occurred. Is that?
I mean, certainly he's had quote-unquote bilateral meetings with Foreign Minister Zarif in the past. We just don't have anything to confirm at this point, in the broader sense of the term bilateral, which is a meeting between the two countries, even despite the lack of diplomatic relations. Michelle in the back, and then
Talked about, you mentioned this climate meeting and Ban Ki-moon's goal of getting enough countries to sign up. Can you tell me what role the U.S. is playing? Are you helping him achieve that goal? And what are you looking towards for that meeting?
So, I mean, I think the big thing to announce on that front was obviously our own announcement with China on the 3rd of September that we will be joining the agreement this year. But in the meantime, the Secretary and numerous other U.S. government officials are talking all the time to other counterparts in other governments to try to encourage other countries to sign up this year so that hopefully the agreement will come into force this year. And the aim of the meeting that the Secretary General will host is also to try to solidify that process and solidify getting to the number of countries that are needed for the agreement to enter into force this year and to encourage countries to do that. But yes, we are engaged in that activity as the United States as well.
But given the U.S. elections this year and the possibility that the next president may not want to be part of this, are you worried that the UN's trying to tie the hands of the next president, or are you helping him push this through before elections?
The United States, we've stated that we look forward to the agreement entering into force this year, and that is the goal of the meeting that the Secretary will be attending, which will hopefully be able to put some momentum behind that this year.
apologies. I think one more question, Rosie.
Sure. The Security Council session on Wednesday on Syria, is that an opportunity for the Secretary and the Russian Foreign Minister to provide an update on the efforts to try to bring some sort of calm back to that country? Is this an opportunity to discuss perhaps some sort of effort to try to broker an eventual peace accord? What's the frame for the meeting?
I think it's too early to tell. I know you heard a lot from the Secretary yesterday from this podium about what's going on with the discussions with the Russians and the agreement that was reached. And it's too early to preview at this point, given that things are sort of fast-moving as to exactly how that will shape up. It is something that just got put on the schedule last week, and that the Secretary has confirmed that he will attend, and certainly will give him an opportunity at that point that we will hear from all of the Council members, including obviously the United States and Russia.
Great. I think we're going to have to stop there. I apologize. Thank you so much,
Okay.
Shiva, for doing this. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Oh, okay, thanks. And I know we weren't able to answer all your questions about bilats or about possible other discussions, as you mentioned, about concerning Syria and other. I think all of this will take shape over the next few days. So just bear with us.
Are you going to announce them piecemeal, or will there be another meeting like this with more details?
We'll probably put out for planning purposes only, media note. But we'll also, as we get closer to Saturday, we'll let you know what kind of the set in stone bilats are.
Thanks.
Yep.
Really, there isn't a single one that's set in stone right now. I don't.
You find that hard to believe?
No, I don't find it hard to believe. I find it impossible.
When we have something to announce, as you've often heard, then we'll announce it. Go ahead, Matt.
You don't have anything to start with? How about a preview of the upcoming General Assembly session?
Check.
Yeah. So as your previous briefer just said, yes, the Secretary did speak quite a bit about the Syria deal yesterday. Fortunately, not all of it was 100% accurate, apparently. I have a couple questions. I just want to see how much more we can clarify what this deal does and what it doesn't do.
Okay.
If in fact we get to 7 days of reduced violence.
Right.
So the first question is, under the terms of the deal, as everyone knows, that if there is this 7 days of reduced violence, the U.S. and Russia will set up this joint, the JIC.
Right.
Does that exist, or will it exist as soon as people have confirmed the 7 days of reduced violence? Or does the 7 days, confirmation of the 7 days of reduced violence merely mean that the process of getting the JIC stood up begins?
You are right that we need to see the 7 days of reduced violence. At that time, once that assessment is made, and let me just clarify as well, when we talk about 7 days of reduced violence, we're also talking about sustained humanitarian access as well. And too often that's left out of the discussion or not emphasized enough, but we need to see both. At that point in time, my understanding is that the JIC, Joint Implementation Center, will begin to be set up. It's not, my understanding, again, is that there won't be an open sign hung out on a door immediately, but that once we get to that point in time, 7 days of reduced violence and humanitarian access, at that point in time, we'll set the JIC up. Now, how long that will take before it's operational, I don't have a solid answer for you. I'll try to get you more clarity on that.
Okay, well, what needs to be done? I mean, what needs to be done between you and the Russians, should we get to the 7 days and the sustained humanitarian access, to set up the JIC? Have the, rules of engagement or the decisions about how much and what kind of intelligence sharing, have those details been arranged, or is that something that is still TBD?
Sure. I don't want to get into too much.
It will be still
Sure.
TBD.
I don't want to get into too much detail and get too far down this hypothetical road because we're just 1 day into this. But I think in response to your question, we have been, obviously, throughout the past several months now, been talking and coordinating closely and trying to reach this agreement with the Russians. So to an extent, these channels are already established. And indeed, as we've talked about a lot from this podium and elsewhere, there are these groups working in Geneva already. So in terms of what needs to be done to set up the Joint Implementation Center, after we reach the 7 days of calm or reduction in violence, my impression is that it's not going to be a tremendously heavy lift because, again, we've already established a lot of this and done a lot of the legwork in just getting to the point of agreement. But there will have to be a certain level or certain degree of coordination ongoing. We'll have to establish processes. We'll have to establish a means of communication, and we'll have to, as you mentioned, talk about the mechanisms by which we share information and intelligence and how that works. We all know globally how this works, right? We're going to have an agreed upon area that, and then the regime would not be able to fly anymore within that area, that consolidated area that we've talked about. And once we get to that point, then we would begin coordinating with Russia on airstrikes specifically targeting Nusra in a strategic and a very calculated way.
Well, the reason why the
Yeah, go
timing
ahead.
of all this is important is because it is not the creation of the JIC that is the trigger for Assad having to ground his air force over the designated area, correct? It's actually when the U.S. and Russia begin the joint operation that they will be, according to what was said yesterday and repeatedly over and over again. It is not the JIC being established that is the trigger. It is the commencement of joint U.S.-Russian strikes. And what you laid out just now and noted that it's taken several months to get just to this point without any of the details of how this cooperation or coordination is going to take place, you're looking at potentially weeks more where Assad's Air Force isn't grounded while the two sides try to hash out exactly how the JIC is going to do, how it's going to do its job, right?
So a couple of points on that. One is we all recognize that the urgency of putting the JIC up and running, getting it up and running as quickly as possible once we get to that 7-day mark of a reduction in violence along with sustained humanitarian access. We all recognize that that is key to the agreement of Assad's forces no longer being able to fly missions within that designated airspace. So I don't think it's going to be a matter of weeks. I can't put a specific day or time on it, but it's not going to be a matter of weeks.
But is it correct that it's not the creation of the JIC that stops, that grounds the Air Force, the Assad Air Force? It is the commencement of the joint operations, or is that not correct?
I'll try to get clarity on that. That's a good question. I believe it's the former, but, or the latter rather, but I'll get clarity on that.
The former
carrying
and
out
the
of-
latter?
No, I said I believe it's the latter.
The latter, so it is the commencement of the airstrikes.
Let me double check. I'll take the question.
So in other words, there is another period of time after the 7 days during which Assad's forces can do whatever they want, essentially.
Again, nobody's talking about, certainly, that was the other point I wanted to make, and thanks for bringing it up, is, we are talking about a sustained period where there is, a period where there's a sustained reduction in violence. What we have seen time and time again, and it's what caused the last cessation of hostilities to fray and ultimately collapse, was the fact that the regime carried out airstrikes saying it was going after Nusra, but in fact was taking out civilian targets. So to say, to make the claim or to ask the question of whether the regime can continue willy-nilly to carry out airstrikes in the name of going after Nusra, that's not the case. We're already looking at who is abiding by this reduction in violence, and this is since yesterday, and we're already assessing when there are allegations of violations, who's responsible for that, and whether they're legitimate violations or not. So that part of that process is already going on.
There are legitimate violations?
I said where there are legitimate violations. We haven't seen that thus far, but I'm saying it's not like it's not like we're saying to the regime, sure, do what you want for the next 7 days or until a JIC is set up.
Does the clock
That's not at all.
reset, or is this coming Monday one-time only deal? In other words, if there's a violation tomorrow, a serious one, do you start again on counting 7 days from Wednesday?
So in theory, how this works is, and I can just say that over the last 24 hours, while we have seen some violations, and I think Secretary Kerry spoke to this yesterday, that this isn't going to be a clean start to this. There are going to be some ongoing incidents of violence. But we have seen, as I said, some reports of sporadic violence, but thus far the arrangement as a whole seems to be holding very clear about saying that, given the level of detail of this agreement, there are some operational details, areas of sensitivity that we believe we don't want or would not be in the interest of the agreement or in anyone's interest to share. Secretary alluded to yesterday the fact that there's a lot of would-be spoilers out there who want to bring this deal and take it apart and make it fail. We're mindful of that. So it's still our assessment that we don't want to share this thing publicly, but that assessment's ongoing. We're still continuing to look at it. And if we get to a point where we believe we can share the details, we will.
Mark, I have something.
Yeah, please, Leslie.
So, yesterday, as we heard the Secretary say that there were some violations, but what are you seeing today?
So, as I said, it was an uneven start. But what we saw over the first 24 hours was the fact that, or we believe that the arrangement as a whole appears to be holding, and that violence is lower than it was in the previous weeks and months. I'm not prepared to say this is check the box that this is day one of 7 days. I think we're going to continue to assess that as we go forward. And as I just made clear to Matt, we can always see a significant violation in the days ahead that force us or force the Russians to reset the clock. And so going forward, we're just taking this day by day, hour by hour, really, and assessing that this is meeting the criteria. But the other thing is, just the fact that we've seen a reduction in violence isn't enough. We need to see access for humanitarian assistance. Now, we believe that's moving. We've seen some signs that that's moving, but we still haven't seen the access. We need to see that concretely take place.
And are you, for this access, are you talking about Aleppo specifically? Because that seems where it seems to be talking.
It's one of the critical areas, but there's many besieged areas in Syria. And I wouldn't say that it needs to be 100%, but we need to see a significant and sustained humanitarian access.
And then I have a follow-up on
Sure.
what this deal is about. So several senior U.S. officials told us that Assad's forces had to be grounded. That was the U.S. push. Now, over the last few weeks, things started developing in which we saw the U.S. saying, well, the Assad's forces can continue to fly even after the JIC is formed in certain areas where Nusra and Islamic State are operating, but that the opposition is not there. What happened in between? Was that a concession that happened on the U.S. part?
No, I don't think so at all. I mean, I think we've been very clear how we envision this arrangement to work, which is that once the JIC is established, it would cover a designated area. In that area, the regime's air forces would no longer be able to fly. The intent here is to take that element out of the equation, because what we saw with the last cessation of hostilities, by far the preponderance of violations of the cessation were on the part of the regime. And the preponderance of those violations were the regime saying, oh, we're just striking Nusra targets, when in fact they were going after opposition targets and in many cases hitting civilian targets. And as we all saw, what was a credible ceasefire in the initial weeks and even months frayed and deteriorated rapidly because of that. So we're trying to take Assad's air forces out of the equation. That's the goal here. And if we get there, then we can have coordination between the U.S. and Russia deciding what targets are legitimate targets, Nusra targets, and then agreement on who hits those targets between us, the U.S., or Russia. So again, it's also about strategically going after Nusra. And we talked a lot about in this room and how in the previous weeks and even months, there was this marbleization, however we want to refer to it, in and around Aleppo, where you may have, regime forces or Russia's may have said, oh, we're going after Nusra, but in fact they were hitting opposition forces, moderate opposition forces who were intermingled. What we're talking about now is a much more strategic approach. And at the same time, concurrently, there's an effort to disaggregate these forces. We have made very clear to the opposition that it is in their interests to, where they are intermingled or commingled with Nusra, to disengage.
And then, so
Sorry for the long answer.
Assad's force can continue to fly in those areas outside that
Designated area.
even through this week and continuing into the next months.
That's my understanding, yes.
Mark, first of all, will the JIC have like a physical address like CENTCOM? Are we going to have?
That's a very good question. I'll have to look at that.
And
I don't know. I mean, in this day and age, that's important, but, you know, so much can be done, obviously, through the wonder of cyberspace and other connectivity that, you know, I can't say that they'll actually be cohabitating a specific building.
And this area that is in effect a no-fly zone for the Syrian Air Force, if, let's say, a Syrian fighter jet, violates this rule, who's going to shoot it down? The Americans or the Russians, or both?
So, fair question. I don't necessarily want to talk about rules of engagement or how these violations will be dealt with, except to say that just as we have taken on the responsibility of ensuring that the moderate opposition abides by the cessation of hostilities, Russia has agreed to take on the responsibility of ensuring that the regime abides by its responsibilities, one of which is to adhere to this no-fly zone.
And my last question on
Yeah,
this.
please.
Now, as a result of this agreement, are, let's say, the lines delineated a lot better? Do we know who's who in what area? Do you have like all the groups laid out and so on? Do you have a map of all?
I think there's a much clearer understanding, and that was, again, a lot of the legwork of the past weeks and months was in trying to establish who was where. But I think also in the coming days, as we communicate with the moderate opposition, and they understand that it's, as I said, not in their interest to remain commingled with Nusra, we are going to see a separation. Please, James.
To this point of how only fairly recently we have been able to acquire a better sense of who exactly is where, by what means? Have we placed chips or other electronic tagging devices on the fighters we like?
I would really defer to the Department of Defense to talk about some of the operational aspects, and I'm not even sure to what level of detail they would be able to get into, since it does touch on intelligence assets and other ways and means by which we gather information about who is where.
How is it that our- go for
But
it.
sorry, just to finish my response, but recognizing the fact that this has been a challenge and remains a challenge, and is part of the reason why we've made an effort to work out with the Russians where or a mechanism by which we can share information about, if we get to that 7-day period and get to the point of establishing a JIC, whereby we can share information, again, not based on trust, but based on a very sober assessment of who is where and located where, so that we can avoid, as what we saw in the previous weeks and months and indeed years, which is indiscriminate attacks that hit hospitals, hit schools, hit civilians.
I just
Please.
am curious
Yeah.
about a state of affairs in which a given conflict involving multiple parties has been underway for over 5 years, but you are telling us here now that only very recently, as in the past week or so, we have suddenly been able to acquire a much better ability to discern one combatant set over another.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't, and again, if that was what I conveyed, then let me try to put it another way. I think that we have put great effort into trying to delineate, because we realize how critical that is to any kind of sustainable cessation of hostilities on the ground. So we put great effort into that through various assets. We also have, obviously, eyes and ears within the moderate Syrian opposition who we've worked with over the past years. And again, I think it's absolutely critical for the success of this agreement, which we're by no means ensuring the success of. There are a lot of challenges, but one of the big challenges is how do you separate the moderate opposition from Nusra, where everyone agrees that Nusra is al-Qaeda affiliated and is a common enemy and threat that we all can target.
Lastly, to Matt's question about the release of the plan, in addressing that, you cited the remarks of Secretary Kerry, who averred to the existence of some number of concerned parties who are very eager to see the plan defeated or collapse. And I just wonder if that isn't a recipe for never releasing any policy or any plan, because there will inevitably always be individuals who look upon the policies or plans as promulgated by any administration and have a vested interest in defeating them or seeing them collapse.
Well, that's a fair point to make. I think at this point in this stage, it is still our assessment that it's too early to release the full details of this plan, but that's something we continue to assess. I'm far be it for me to say never will we release it. I don't think that's the case at all. And certainly, there's a case to be made for being as transparent as possible. We've made efforts to explain what is, in fact, a very complex plan. But we'll continue to assess that going forward. I think the concern is just that it's a very complex battle space, and we need to be very cognizant of the fact that given that complexity, there are a lot of spoilers and a lot of potential spoilers out there.
Can we go to Iran?
Let's finish up. Guys, and I apologize, I've got about 5 more minutes. I know there's a lot of questions.
On
Please,
the
David.
subject then of transparency, will the JIC, when created, be able to issue joint statements publicly, or are we still going through the podium if we want to ask about their assessments? When the previous ceasefire came into effect, we were repeatedly told we don't want to litigate individual allegations of ceasefire violations. Right. This is going on in private. Will the JIC continue with that? Will deliberations of the JIC remain secret?
It's a good question. It's my understanding that they won't have a mechanism within the JIC to issue statements, but I don't have a solid answer on that.
Ask you what the JIC thinks.
I think that's my understanding. Okay. But if that changes, I'll let you know.
And does it replace the deconfliction body that existed in Geneva beforehand? Is it a development of that?
No, I would say it's somewhat separate, because the deconfliction is about deconflicting the overall airspace in Syria, where you have U.S. fighters and other anti-ISIL coalition fighters operating, and in that same airspace, Russian jets operating. And that, as we made very clear, was simply a very straightforward logistical deconfliction mechanism to ensure that we weren't operating in the same airspace, to ensure the safety of our crews.
Insofar as to follow up on the previous question, we don't know whether it'll have a physical address, but if it has one, it's in Geneva.
That would be most likely, yes.
And is there a table with soldiers and spies and diplomats?
I'll try to get more color and context for you as we go forward.
Yes.
I'd love that. Please.
Just some clarification on the targeting. So is the idea that with this no-fly zone, the Syrian Air Force would not have anything to target other than ISIS if it was airborne?
That's correct.
And would the Russians and the Americans also carry out joint operations against ISIS, or are you very much focusing on Nusra?
In terms of joint operations against ISIS,
or like through this mechanism, I mean.
Right. I'm not aware that ISIS targets are on the table. My understanding is that it's just Nusra within that designated area.
And just finally, quickly.
I mean, obviously, separately, we're obviously going to continue to carry out airstrikes against ISIL. But my understanding, not coordinated and not part of the JIC.
Okay. And in terms of, you keep saying that Nusra is clearly al-Qaeda and therefore it's beyond the pale, but some of the arguments from the opposition is A, Nusra hasn't carried out attacks outside of the country, so it should be looked at differently, and B, Hezbollah is also on the terrorist list of the United States, and it wasn't designated in this in the way the fighting is going on in Syria, so there are double standards. How do you respond to that?
Well, look, in terms of Nusra, it's our assessment that they do have aspiration to carry out attacks on the West. And in response to your second question, I would just say that there is joint agreement that Nusra poses a threat, not just to Syria, but also to the region and to the United States. I would
there
also
is a
add
joint
that,
agreement
I would
on the
also
side.
add that with Hezbollah and other groups that, Iran has signaled that it will abide by the agreement. And that this agreement, as much as it holds, it is incumbent on all the members of the ISSG to exert whatever influence they have on the various operators on the ground in Syria to abide by the cessation of hostilities. We've always said that. This cessation of hostilities is only as strong as the members of the ISSG, the stakeholders, who exerting the influence that they have on the different players and factions and operators on the ground in Syria. I want to very quickly, if we can just finish, and then I know you have a question, and I'll take your question, Nike. I apologize. Oh, yeah, yes,
Okay.
James, yeah.
On Iran, we saw yesterday, we reported yesterday that on Saturday, September 10th, 2 U.S. Navy reconnaissance planes flying 13 miles off the shore of Iran received a warning from the Iranian military to either alter their course or be shot down by Iranian missile capabilities. First, most broadly, do you have a response to this set of developments?
My response would be in line with what we said, because frankly, there have been previous incidents much like this. I think we had one a week or so ago. And they're concerning, obviously. They escalate tensions and needlessly escalate tensions, frankly. And our forces within the area, within the region, are operating according to freedom of navigation standards. We have conveyed our concerns to Iran. I know the DOD has conveyed its concerns. First and foremost, I'm doing them publicly. I don't want to speak to other means of communications that we've had with the Iranian government, but the fact of the matter is, it is a matter of concern because we've seen a succession of these events over the past month or so. And go ahead.
To that point, just this year, we've seen the seizure of our sailors. We've seen a doubling, according to the Pentagon's numbers, in the number of naval confrontations over this time last year. Now they're threatening to blow our planes out of the sky. We've seen a very aggressive series of ballistic missile tests from the regime. There's more American hostages in Iran. And so I just wonder how you can possibly assess the evolution of this relationship, in which the landmark moment is the finalization of this nuclear deal, and rule out the possibility that, in fact, one of the byproducts of this deal has been to embolden the regime to worse rather than better behavior.
Well, we always were very clear that their objective in reaching a nuclear agreement with Iran was to prevent them from obtaining a nuclear weapon, which we, I think, all agree would only exacerbate the threat in the region of Iran, as well as exacerbate tensions in the region, and pose a real national security risk to the United States. We never said that this was going to solve all of Iran's bad behavior. And in fact, we would like, as much as we would like to see Iran's behavior change in the region, we've not seen a significant shift.
In fact, you have seen a shift. It's gotten worse.
Well,
am I correct about that?
Well, again, I don't have all the facts and figures in front of me, but we have seen some disturbing, as you cited, trends. And I think two things. One is that, in our view, it only makes the significance of the nuclear agreement that much more important, because the last thing anyone would want to see in the region is a nuclear-armed Iran. But it also shows that Iran has a choice to make. And if it wants to engage further with the West, following on the engagement that led to the nuclear agreement, more productively and play a more constructive role in the region, or continue with, as I said, its bad behavior. Thus far, we've not seen that shift to a constructive engagement.
But you can't rule out that, in fact, this deal has served as a cause for this more aggressive posture.
I mean, I can't rule that out. It's just, we've, Iran, like many countries, has an internal political process that's defined by a lot of different dynamics. But I can't give an assessment one way or the other in that regard.
So is it correct that you're saying that the nuclear deal is important because Iran would be doing all the same stuff that it's doing now?
And pursuing a nuclear weapon.
And with a nuke. Is that
Right,
what you're
or
saying?
possibly with a nuke, or at least pursuing a nuclear
All right,
weapon.
But I think you're right that they have shown a willingness to engage with the West, but it's to engage militarily, isn't it?
Well, I mean, they are a member of the ISSG, the International Syria Support Group. They have signed on to the goal of that organization, which is to end the conflict and lead to a political transition in Syria. We continue to look for signs that they're willing to engage constructively across the board.
That's the only thing that they've done in terms of engagement, or except for the military stuff that
Yeah.
we've been talking about. That's pretty slim pickings, isn't it?
Well, again, I'm not here to advocate on behalf of the
Okay.
Iranian government and their engagement with the West.
If more American hostages were taken, could James suggested that more American hostages recently taken?
I don't have a list in front of me, but there
But there
continue to
are?
be detained Americans, and we've
How
expressed
is-
concern. I don't have a number. We continue to raise their cases, obviously, with the Iranian government at every opportunity. Please, Becky, last question.
Yes, Mark, thank you. Myanmar over Burma, the de facto leader of Myanmar is visiting Aung San Suu Kyi.
She is.
What would be the focal point, and how should we expect the issues of remaining sanctions to be discussed?
Well, you're right that we are very excited to welcome State Councilor Aung San Suu Kyi on her first visit to the United States in her new role in government after Burma's significant steps in its democratic transition. I think much has changed over the past several years for the Burmese people, but our goal remains the same with respect to Burma, which is to see a peaceful, prosperous, democratic nation emerge, in which all people can live in relative harmony and are able to fully exercise their rights and continue to build a close friendship between our two countries. So I think, we're going to talk about the gamut of issues, human rights certainly, concerns, but also continued steps that Burma can take along the path towards a fuller and stronger democracy. Again, we've seen progress, but there's more work that needs to be done. So that's going to be I think, the focus of our engagement over the next couple of days.
Last time the U.S. announced the ease of some of the sanctions is on May 17. How do you address criticism and urge from the human rights groups that the remaining sanctions are critical to ensure the improvement of
Sure.
democracy?
I mean, look, we've always, as you posited in your question, the lifting of sanctions has always been in response to what we have seen as democratic progress on the part of the Burmese government. We're not ready to pull back all those sanctions yet. Some remain in place, and we always retain the right to continue those as long as we feel that they're useful. Thanks.
In the past 4 months, do you see what improvement do you see those remaining sanctions in terms of thwarting human rights abuses?
In terms of?
Thwarting human rights abuses and punishing the cronies.
Well, again, I don't have anything to announce in terms of lifting additional sanctions. We continue to remain engaged with Burma. We continue to press them to make continued democratic reforms, and certainly with respect to human rights. Thanks. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it.